In the quiet suburbs, an urban legend haunts the imaginations of many. A story of a young babysitter, a chilling phone call, and a night of pure terror. This harrowing tale, also known as the Shadowed Sitter, has made its way into collections like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, leaving readers shivering in its wake. Our story begins with a teenage girl eager to earn some extra money who finds a babysitting job for a couple in a large, isolated old house. The parents, excited for a rare night out at the movies, leave her in charge of their 3 young children. As the night wears on, the babysitter dutifully puts the children to bed and settles downstairs to watch television. The house is eerily silent, save for the faint rustle of the wind outside. Suddenly, the phone rings, shattering the quiet. She picks it up, and a chill runs down her spine as she hears nothing but heavy breathing, followed by a man's sinister voice asking, "Have you checked on the children?" Terrified, she hangs up, trying to brush it off as a cruel prank. She attempts to return to her show, but her mind races with unsettling thoughts. 15 minutes later, the phone rings again. With trembling hands, she answers, only to hear hysterical laughter on the other end. The same voice taunts her, "Why haven't you checked on the children?" Panic sets in as she slams down the phone. Desperate for help, she calls the police. The operator instructs her to keep the caller on the line if he rings again, so they can trace the call. Minutes later, the phone rings once more. She answers, her heart pounding in her chest. The heavy breathing returns, and the voice warns, "You should really check on the children." The babysitter listens in horror to the man's deranged laughter before hanging up again. Almost immediately, the phone rings again. This time, it's the police operator yelling frantically, "Get out of the house right now." The calls are coming from the upstairs phone. In a state of shock, she drops the phone, her mind racing. Suddenly, she hears heavy footsteps descending the stairs. Without a moment's hesitation, she bolts from the house, her legs propelling her faster than ever. Just as she slams the front door behind her, a man's hand crashes against the glass. She screams, sprinting into the street, where a police car is just arriving. The officers rush into the house, finding the 2 children upstairs, sobbing and hiding in a closet. In the parents' bedroom, a bloody axe lies ominously next to the upstairs phone, and an open window lets in the cool night breeze. The madman, thwarted by the police's timely arrival, has vanished into the night, leaving behind only the remnants of his horrific plan. This story reminds us that sometimes the greatest horrors lurk not in our imaginations, but in the shadows of our own homes. In the heart of a towering apartment building, an eerie legend lurked behind its seemingly mundane facade. This building, like many others, had a missing 13th floor, a superstition seemingly kept at bay. Yet, on one fateful day, 3 adventurous children would encounter a chilling secret hidden within the building's abandoned floors. What began as a simple exploration would quickly descend into a nightmarish ordeal, forever altering their perceptions of the unknown. The story narrator mentions that when I was a child, my family lived in a towering apartment building minus 14 stories of concrete and steel. A curious quirk of the building was its missing 13th floor. It skipped straight from the 12th to the 14th. Yet, despite the absence of this supposedly unlucky floor, the elevator still boasted a button for the 13th, though it never seemed to function. 2 friends, Terry and June, and I, who were the same age and shared the same school, spent many of our evenings playing together in the building. One day, driven by a mix of curiosity and boredom, while waiting for our parents to return, we decided to explore the building's roof. We rode the elevator up to the 14th floor and found the door leading to the roof. After a while, our excitement waned and we headed back down. It was then that June realized she had left her coat on the roof. She hit the stop button and pressed the button for the 14th floor, intending to retrieve it. Without warning, the elevator jolted to a halt with a series of beeps. The doors slid open, revealing the dark void between the floors. Terry attempted to climb out through the gap, but I stopped him, warning him of the danger. If the elevator moved while he was halfway out, it could have sliced him in 2. Instead, I frantically pressed the emergency button. The elevator groaned in response, and the doors clanged shut. We stood in silence, shivering, when suddenly the lights went out. We were enveloped in pitch darkness. Amid the blackness, one button on the panel flickered to life, the 13th floor button. None of us had touched it, and it wasn't supposed to light up. A chill of terror gripped us as the elevator began to move upward. June furiously jabbed the stop button, but it was futile. We were helplessly carried past the floors. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. The elevator screeched and ground to a halt. The doors creaked open, revealing an impenetrable darkness. We huddled together, paralyzed by fear. Then came a sound of faint, squelching noise in the murky blackness. It was the kind of sound one might make by throwing a wet rag against a wall. The noise grew louder, faster, and more insistent. The sound of something wet and heavy dragging itself across the floor made our blood run cold. A putrid smell of decay and rot filled the air, making it hard to breathe. The noises quickened, growing more frantic and terrifying. Just as the horrifying sounds seemed to be closing in on us, the elevator jolted back to life. The doors began to close with a harsh clang, and the stench of death seemed to engulf us. As the elevator descended, something slammed against the doors with a wet, sickening thud. The elevator creaked and groaned as it moved downward. When the doors finally opened, we were on the ground floor, greeted by the sight of my father waiting there. Relief flooded over me as I jumped into his arms. I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if he hadn't called the elevator at that precise moment. The mystery of the 13th floor and its eerie inhabitant remains unsolved, a chilling reminder of that fateful night. In a quaint little house on the edge of town lived an elderly couple whose love had withstood the test of time. They had been together for so long that they could finish each other's sentences, a testament to their deep connection. Their lives were intertwined in a dance of familiarity and affection. One fateful day, the old woman fell gravely ill. Her devoted husband stayed by her side day and night, doing everything in his power to nurse her back to health. Despite his tireless efforts, she succumbed to her illness, leaving him heartbroken and lost without his one true love. The doctor arrived soon after and pronounced her dead. Given the sweltering summer heat, they held a small funeral service the next day and buried her quickly. As her coffin was being lowered into the grave, the old man, consumed by grief, attempted to throw himself in after her. Friends and family had to restrain him until the grave was filled. That night, the old man returned to his now empty and silent home. As he lay in bed, he was disturbed by a strange scratching sound. It grew louder and more insistent, but he couldn't determine its source. Turning over, he was met with a sight that froze his blood. Standing outside his bedroom window was the ghostly figure of his wife. Her eyes were sunken and hollow, her mouth agape in a silent scream, and her fingers clawed desperately at the window pane. In a state of panic, he rushed to open the window, only to watch her vanish into thin air. Desperate and terrified, he called the doctor, begging to have his wife's body exhumed. The doctor dismissed his pleas, attributing his visions to the stress of his wife's death. However, the haunting apparition continued to appear each night, leaving him tormented and sleep-deprived. Unable to endure it any longer, the old man took matters into his own hands. He dressed quickly, grabbed a shovel, and made his way to the graveyard. Under the cover of darkness, he reached his wife's grave and began to dig frantically. Dirt flew in every direction as he worked tirelessly to unearth her coffin. When he finally pried open the lid, he recoiled in horror. His wife's mouth was frozen in a silent scream, and the inside of the coffin lid was marred with scratch marks. Her fingers were worn down to the bone, evidence of her desperate struggle. The sight confirmed his worst fears: she had been buried alive. The realization of her torment and his inability to save her in time weighed heavily on him, leaving him forever haunted by the tragic and terrifying end of his beloved wife. There is an eerie urban legend about a cursed VHS videocassette, a tale so chilling it inspired the infamous movie, The Ring. The legend warns that anyone who watches the tape will die within 48 hours. This is the story of 3 girls who dared to ignore that warning. Years ago, in a small town, 3 best friends were enjoying their summer holidays. Being fans of horror, they decided to have a sleepover filled with scares. Late at night, they piled into a car and drove to their local video rental store, only to find it closed. Determined, they spent the next half hour searching for an open store, eventually stumbling upon a tiny shop tucked away on a side street. Inside, the girls couldn't agree on a film to rent. One of them approached the woman behind the counter for a suggestion. The woman, with a peculiar smile, said she had just the thing and disappeared into a back room. While waiting, one of the girls noticed a tape lying on the counter. It was dirty, stained, and lacked a label or cover. Intrigued, she reached for it. Just then, the woman burst from the back room, slamming her hand down on the tape. "That's not something you girls should be watching," she said with a strange smile. When asked about it, the woman only referred to it as a home movie, insisting it wasn't suitable for them. She handed them an old horror film instead. The girls reluctantly agreed to rent the suggested tape, but as the woman returned to the back room, one of the girls seized the opportunity to swipe the mysterious tape, stuffing it into her purse. That night, back at home, curiosity got the better of them. They decided to watch the stolen tape. As they pressed play, the power went out, plunging the room into darkness. However, the television remained on. With a crackle of static, the video began. On the screen, they saw a woman tied to a wooden stake, surrounded by an angry mob brandishing torches. The mob shouted and spat at her, calling her a witch. As they set the wood ablaze, the woman laughed maniacally and cursed them all, declaring that anyone who witnessed her death would meet the same fate within 2 days. Suddenly, the screen went to static, and the VCR made a skipping sound before shutting off. Terrified, the girls sat in darkness until the power returned. They tried to convince themselves it was a prank, but were too scared to dismiss the curse completely. Deciding to return the tape, they drove back to the store, only to find an abandoned building and an empty lot where the store had been. 2 days later, tragedy struck. The first girl was found floating in a swimming pool, her body burned beyond recognition. The second was discovered charred in the middle of a park. The third girl's remains were found in a furnace. In each case, the police were baffled nothing around the bodies had been touched by flames, leading them to suspect spontaneous combustion. During their investigation, the police found a trash can outside the house of one of the girls. It had been burned out, but amidst the ashes, they found a videotape, inexplicably untouched by the fire. The cursed tape had claimed its victims, and its dark legend lived on, a haunting reminder of the peril that lies within curiosity and defiance.